Hi, everyone, and welcome to this first session of our Asia Pacific convening. I'm going to be joined by the most wonderful and inspiring panel, and I'd like to invite them on stage right now. We've got, first of all, Yang Bahagia Hannah Yeoh, the Deputy Minister for Women, Family, and Community Development here in Malaysia. Dr. Oyun Sanjasaran, the Director of External Affairs at the Green Climate Fund from Mongolia, and Arthur Huang, who is the founder and CEO of MiniWiz. Great, welcome to all three of you. Welcome to all of you, and I think we can get the energy up a little bit more, right? Don't you think? Just a little bit more energy. How are we all feeling? Very good. Yes, that sounds more like the start of a panel that says, we are the future, progress and possibility in the Asia Pacific. I think that feels more like the energy of the future. So here's what we're going to be doing, right? We've got a huge amount of, I think, interesting material to explore. And we want to explore this idea in particular about what it means to be the future. Not just to analyze the future or talk about it, but to be the future. And I've asked our three panelists to start us off today by sharing some thoughts on one question. Right? And what I've asked them is, what are they optimistic and what are they pessimistic about in the future? This will give us some time to hear from them and the amazing work that they're doing. And then we want to focus a lot on your questions, right? The kind of ideas and comments and responses that you might have to them in terms of how you want to deal with the ideas that they will have presented to you. So let's start with, in a sense, one of our hosts here in Malaysia today. I've asked Hannah to give us some thoughts on her optimism and pessimism. And Hannah, apart from being Deputy Minister in the Women, Family and Community Development portfolio, is also a mother of two. And what she tells me is that that is a much harder thing to do than her actual day job, which sounds just about right. So Hannah, why don't you take us away on optimism and pessimism?
Thank you, Aaron. Asia Pacific, I think, has a lot of potential to offer to the world. We have more than 60% of the world's population in this region. And we have actually a lot of diversity among the nations in Asia Pacific. And because of that, we have a variety of talent. And I'm excited about what the future can give in terms of women empowerment and youth empowerment. The global climate is one that's very empowering for women leadership, not just in politics, but I think in sports and in business. So I just want to quickly take some time to mention a few. Yesterday we read about the news about the new Prime Minister for Finland. But before Finland, there was New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, in this region. And she's below 40 and captivated the world with how she handled the shooting in Christchurch and how she managed this very extreme climate also, racial and religious extremism. We also have in Malaysia, we have Nicole David, a very young professional squash player, and she was a world champion not for 1 year, but for 9 years. And that's something I think the young people or the world need to see, because we are very fast in producing champions, but to keep that title for 9 years, that's quite a feat. And we have people like that in our region. And in business, you see the rise of young businessmen, people like Anthony Tan from Grab, Nadim from Gojek, all in this region. So I'm very optimistic about what this region can offer to the rest of the world. What I'm pessimistic about is the fact that we need to play catch-up game with the speed of social media. So we need to start equipping our children and our young people to cope. Because, in Asia, everything happens so fast. You have Japan, you have China, you have Korea. While we are talking about a new gadget, in 6 months, it may be out of fashion or out of trend. And so can our children and our future generation catch up? And can our values catch up with this trend? That's something I feel every nation needs to start empowering our children, or at least provide some kind of safety system to help them cope with the speed that we're in. That's all.
Fantastic. Hannah, thank you for getting us off to that start, right? So women and youth in terms of your optimism, and then how we play catch up with disruptive and emerging technologies in the more pessimistic side. Great. Arthur is going to go next, and I've asked Arthur again to share his thoughts on optimism and pessimism. The one thing I wanted to share about Arthur is, apart from what you see in his profile in your booklet, he also describes himself as master toilet cleaner. Now, I'm going to let him explain some of this, and hopefully you can go find him during lunch and find out a bit more about why he actually calls himself that. But I thought it was a masterful description. And Arthur, take us away on why you think the world is something it's worth being optimistic and pessimistic about.
I think we have enough pessimism out there. You know the world is full of crap, yeah? Okay. And let's start with the pessimism, and that's how we address the optimism. Okay, the pessimism started with a lot of fake climate change news, I think, for me. Initially as a scholar or as a scientist or as an engineer, you get very frustrated when you hear the word biodegradable. You get very sick of hearing circular economy, circularities. You get a lot of people who never done a thing in their life and talking about these issues as if they are expert in the field and spreading that through social media. Okay, sensationalism is getting the best of this issue, and this is very scary because then it make you blinded to the real solutions or the actual action needs to be taken. This is where the optimism came in, I think. For us, we started 20 years ago just precisely trying to address that because we realized all the technology that we are playing with, it has a two-pronged AI, robotics, smart controls, surveillance. It sounds really scary, no? Okay. But there is also an advantage to that in terms of if you use those materials, use those technology that's currently available to us, this sharing economy thing, can you use that in a better way than to just benefit some companies or some crazy founder? How's Grab, for example, saving environmental issues? If you ask that question, if you actually do a due diligence on the carbon footprint analysis, you'll be very surprised. So you can use those new generation of technology to hold each other accountable. And for example, just an example of what we do robotic machine, decentralized, so you can collect trash and transform it on site. Okay, the campaign is called Trash Presso, so we can collect trash all the way to 4,000 meters, okay, and transform it into a school, or you can do that in an airport at a beach cleanup. The next thing is, the smart machine needs to know what type of data, so you need to survey using AI camera, so you can deploy these surveillance very cheaply to know what type of material you're feeding into the machine. And you need cloud computing to power that, because without that data, the smart machine is useless, right? You see, all this is actually, and how do you make that really cheap? With pneumatic control, how do you make that really using lowest power consumptions? 3.5 kilowatts, so it can be powered by solar, so it can be powered by hydrogen, so it can be fuel cells. Okay, you see, this is the type of repertoire and tools that it's available to any of us who are trying to do something new today. So, take it back.
Great. Thank you, Arthur. And I think what I'm hearing from you, right, is the importance of the two-sidedness in everything. That technology is both boon and bane for us, and it's something we need to be able to harness but manage the effects of. I guess that takes us back to what you mentioned at the start, right? If the world is indeed full of crap, as someone who practices in the loop economy, then actually that is both a good and a bad thing if we know how to actually manage the potential of it. So let's hear from Oyun now. Oyun, apart from being Director of External Affairs at the Green Climate Fund, is also a black belt in karate. So due warning has been given to everyone, right? If you ask her very difficult questions, you know what may happen at lunchtime. So Oyun's going to start us off with her thoughts on what she's most optimistic and pessimistic about.
Thank you, Aaron. I feel so much energy and dynamism when I came here this morning, so big congratulations to every one of you. And what I'm optimistic about is actually about young leaders. Not about youth in general, but young leaders like you. And I really congratulate every one of you who already, I think, contributed a great deal to your communities. Today is 10th of December, which is International Day of Human Rights. Maybe some of you will know. And I'm mentioning it because exactly 30 years ago, 89, 10th of December, there was a first pro-democracy protest in Mongolia, in Ulaanbaatar. It was minus 30 degrees Celsius. And my brother, late brother Zorik, who was one of the main pro-democracy leaders, he also led with his friends, this major pro-democracy movement, and within 6 months, they managed to garner the support of hundreds of thousands of people, and they stood against then the communist regime, which was for 70 years, ruled one-party rule, and within 6-7 months, we managed to change the constitution, new democratic elections, freedom to travel, freedom to human rights, freedom to say what we feel and what we think. But my brother was 27, so he was only 27. We created a foundation called Zurich Foundation, and we also run a large number of not only scholarship programs, but also fellowship programs. So in the last 15 or 20 years, when I compare the first cohort of young leaders of the Zurich Foundation with the current cohorts, I can see a complete change in the way youth see the world, how they're much more open, much more dynamic, and not only theoretically, they can also have the solutions to the challenges that we face. Greta Thunberg, she managed just within the last 12 months to so much raise the awareness on climate crisis. So the optimism I have is about young leaders, about people who are in their not only 20s, but now in the teenagers. And it's not only just being the future, but the current solution to the challenges. What I'm pessimistic about is, unfortunately, the climate change and environmental degradation that we face. As Aaron said, I work for the Green Climate Fund, and we try to fund in more than 100 countries different projects, programs, and solutions to both mitigation and adaptation. Some of you, and many of you, I'm sure, are interested in helping to tackle the challenge. You may have seen some of the reports in the last few weeks. World Meteorological Organization is saying that again, where this year, the last year was the warmest on the record, and actually the world experiencing the warmest average temperature since the end of the last ice age, which was 12,000 years ago. And it's a increase of more than 1 degree Celsius. And compared to the pre-industrial revolution, the CO2 emissions are almost 150 degrees, 50% increase. And methane, another potent greenhouse gas, is almost 250% compared to the pre-industrial levels. And of course, what is very worrying is that we haven't been able as a humanity to effectively address it. And you probably know that this week in Madrid, there is a conference of parties, and everybody, all the member states, but also civil society, private sector, is trying to address how every country can increase their what's called NDCs, nationally determined contributions. How can we tackle leapfrogging to greener in the next decade or so? Because especially in Asia Pacific, and this is Asia Pacific Leadership Forum and cohort, especially in Asia Pacific, we will be seeing a major increase in demand in energy and other resources. The world population doubled since 1950. The GDP in the next 20 years is going to double. The middle class is going to triple. And of course, the demand on energy and water is going to increase. Infrastructure needs, again, especially in emerging economies and Asia Pacific, is going to increase, and we're expecting almost $90 trillion worth of investment coming in the next 15 years or so. These are the needs for infrastructure. And unless in the next few years and the next decade, we reverse the trend and lock in low emissions, we're going to face very dire consequences. But this is not only pessimism. We must, both my generation, you young generation, we must turn this crisis into an opportunity. We have to change all the investments into low carbon investment. We have to shift all the billions and trillions that are going into investments, into low carbon, greener investments, into new technologies. And that's how we're going to create the opportunities for the future. And that's pessimism that we cannot just be pessimistic, we have to turn into major opportunity as well, and we have to tackle this problem. Otherwise, it will be very, very dire consequences we've been already seeing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oyen. So we've heard quite sobering things, right, about social media, about technology, and about climate change, but also quite a lot of cause for celebration and for hope in terms of what women and young people in particular can do for us. So I guess the big question now is we'd like to hear from all of you in the room. You know, we want to hear your thoughts, actually, in terms of what your responses might be. Is there anything you'd like our panelists to kind of probe a little bit further? I just have a few requests for you when you actually pose these questions. The first is that I'd like these to be genuine questions, right? So a statement followed by a question mark, right? Not so much a long paragraph followed by the question or the statement, can you please make a few comments on this? So if we can just make sure we actually steer ourselves to actual comments, I think that'll be great. And I also want to make sure that if you ask a question, you're using it to actually add to the wisdom and the overall knowledge of this community. Because very often, sometimes questions can be used more for self-promotion than not. So I think in this group, the risk of that is probably lower, one would hope. But just in case it's not, I'm just going to put this out there right now, right? So genuine questions, tell us who you are, and also if you are directing your question to a specific person, let us know who that is so that that person can actually respond from the panel. So what I'm going to ask you to do is this. Think about the question, and for the next 2 minutes, just have a quick discussion with your neighbor about what that question is going to be, right? What do you want to pose to this group? Sometimes these rehearsals can be quite useful. They're a bit of quality control on the questions. And they make sure that when we get the questions, they will be genuinely wise and wisdom-adding to the whole discussion. So I'll keep time. Let's just take 2 minutes to do this. We can get some of that background music back in the hall, because that, I think, will pump up the adrenaline a bit. And at about 2 minutes, I'll call you for time and let you know that we're ready. We'll take about 2 or 3 questions at a time so that we cover as much ground as possible. Everybody ready? Right, let's do this. 2 minutes of quality control and discussion time with your neighbor on what exactly your question is going to be.
I did what I had to do. Saw it through without exemption. I planned each charted course, each careful step along the byway.
Structure,
More,
civil engineering and architecture.
much more than this, I did it my way. Yes, there were times, I'm sure you knew, when I bit off more than I could chew. But through it all, when there was doubt, I ate it up and spit it out. I faced it all, and I stood tall, and did it my
Time check, 30 seconds. 30 seconds, and we'll come back into the plenary for all the questions. Okay, if you can wrap up the discussions that you're having, and then we'll come back to the main group, and see what questions you have to pose for our panel. Everybody ready? So, nobody likes to ask the first question, so we'll go straight to the second question. Who would like to pose the second question? Right, let's take the lady in front here. I'll come to as many as I can, okay? You on the left there, and then the lady on the right hand there in the front, third row. Okay, so let's start with your question here in the front.
Test?
Yes.
Day, I'm Regine, and I'm from Guam. And we have a couple of folks from Guam that were just kind of discussing some of issues about surrounding indigenous communities from where we're coming from across the Pacific. And, you know, a lot of our communities are the most affected by issues around climate change, especially in Micronesia. And so we just wanted to ask, maybe for each of the panel members, what are you doing and how can we help to connect with you better, and how can you help to maybe amplify some of the issues that are going on in smaller communities like Guam and the Marshalls?
Excellent. So Regine's question on smaller communities, in particular indigenous communities, right, in Guam and in the Marshall Islands and other similar areas. Great. So we had a question here as well.
Okay. Hi, my name's Amy. I'm from Brunei. I wanted to find out more from all of the panelists. What do you see as unique about Asia Pacific that youth from this region can offer? And I hope that will help us sort of direct our focus this week and see what we can do together.
Excellent. Thank you, Amy. And we had one question at the side there. Yep, on the right.
Hello, I'm Sheena from the Philippines. I'd like to ask specifically to our parliament member, Hannah. What do you think is the greatest challenge for young members of a legislative body in Asia Pacific, or maybe in Southeast Asia, and how were you able to overcome it? Speaker of more than 10 years, I think, of experience, because I believe that public policy is a potent force to make change in Asia Pacific. And I think a lot of young people want to engage in policy making. So that would be all. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Sheena. And thank you all three of you for keeping your questions brief and sharp. That is the standard of questions we'll be expecting for the rest of this panel and all your other panels as well, right? Just to get that out there. So why don't we start with the Asia Pacific question from Amy, right? What is unique about the Asia Pacific and how do all of you contribute as emerging leaders? Would someone like to start us off from our panelists? Arthur, you want to go? And then we can get Oyun and then Hannah, and then maybe after that Hannah can take the question on legislative bodies as well.
Sorry, what's the question?
What is unique about the Asia Pacific, right? In terms of what young people can bring and how do they link up with you in particular?
You know, like the climate crisis is a global problem. It's not a local issues, right? Okay, even though you're clean pockets, let's say, of certain environmental issues, but it actually affects everyone. So for example, the ocean is linked, the air is linked, the water resources are linked. Okay, that is actually a global issue. It's not just a local issue. But I think for developing nations, like where I was growing up, like, you know, the issue is balancing the economic growth with whatever global issues that we can deal with, right? So climate change has always come not in like harmony with that growth issues. It's always like local development, okay, trumps environmental protections, right? It's always like that. Okay, even for a lot of communities. So when we went to all the way up into these like beautiful scenic area, and then you're asking people, oh, dude, like, don't buy Kinder eggs. But, come on, who doesn't enjoy a bit of chocolate with a little toy? If you actually think about it, how cruel are you to even say that? You deny people of the pleasure of that. And this is the type of dilemma we're constantly facing. So can you devise a system, a business model, okay, where the local creativity So this is kind of what we are aiming at, the type of system that we trying to deploy. Or can you use the creativity locally through the technology you're providing, provide these micro infrastructure, allows people to actually benefit from that creativity. At the same time, clean up the environmental issues. We've been trying very hard to come up with a business plan, and we have failed miserably again and again and again. Okay, you can look at it in our finance. Okay, and it's so. Again, this is a defocused strategy. Okay, and we are doing this without investors' money. Just so you know. Okay, so just imagine in every local community, you can deal with the local issue today, the global issue today, with a local business model that addresses a global problem. But you just have to keep trying. Sorry.
Right. So we need to harness the uniqueness of the region, but in ways that actually allow us to achieve global creativity rather than merely local impact. Okay, so that's one thought. Oyen?
It's very clear that our region, Asia Pacific, led the growth, the world global growth in the last maybe 20, if not 30 years. If you look at different consumption patterns, global ones, the consumption patterns have been going sort of relatively not very steep until China and India started growing, and then all of a sudden you see the steep growth. And of course, it's not only China and India, and other big Asian economies contributed as well. So although the region led the growth, we also contributed a big deal to both emissions, but also environmental degradation as well. And that's why I think it's our responsibility in our region also lead the leapfrogging and the solutions to those problems as well. And if you look at the top emitters, greenhouse gas emitters of the world, of course it's now, the top 5 would be China, US, India, Russia, but also European Union as a big, all the 29 countries, although Europe, of course, is leading in the decarbonization path as well. So, and China, although it's leading internally as well in trying to go more renewable and more also to low carbon infrastructure investment. At the same time, I think it's very important for the developed countries, for industrialized countries of the world, to help and assist developing countries of the world to leapfrog to greener, including with climate finance. The Green Climate Fund where I work, actually most of the contributors, and we just concluded very successfully replenishment of the Green Climate Fund. We raised almost $10 billion, which sounds big, but it's not actually, it's very little compared to the needs. So what we do is we try, and then there was a question from Guam lady, right? What we try to do is we try to use a scarce public resource, and most of the funding came from the public resources from mostly developed countries, and blend it to invest into mostly private sector, but also public sector, so that $1 can raise $10 and make a project from what would be a business as usual brown project, for that project to leapfrog to greener. So we try to leverage the risk, do everything possible, including capacity building, de-risking the policies, so that any investment that is done in developing countries, and we've been working in more than 100 countries, so that those projects from now onwards try to leapfrog to greener, so that we lock in low emissions. For Guam and for small island developing countries, almost, I think 20% of our funding in the last 4 years, almost $800 million, also went to SIDS, and the mostly also goes to adaptation. Of course, mitigation, which is reducing emissions, is very important, but we can't just deal with only mitigation. We also have to now prepare ourselves to be more resilient and more adapted to the climate change. So most of the funding into SIDS countries are going to adaptation. So I think no longer, we need to look at some leaders or at some governments to make a decision. All of us, governments, private sector, civil society, every single citizen, every youth can contribute to the solutions. And of course, I think the youth is all consumers, and the attitudes of youth is changing. And I think the change of the public change in the public attitude, change of every single citizen will be the solution to go forward.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Owen. I think that point about the trans-sector nature of these challenges is so important, right? That we can't really rely on traditional categories like governments, businesses, civil society, community groups. It's about all of those coming together and combining, which is why so many of our emerging leaders here come from different sectors so that they can actually cross-pollinate the solutions they bring out. And this panel itself is actually very cross-sectoral, right? So, Hannah, why don't you take us on some of your thoughts there, and also the question on legislative bodies.
Yeah. On Asia Pacific, I think I mentioned earlier, what we have is a big pool of people with great talent. And so we need to learn how to celebrate diversity really well in this area. And because we are dealing with a lot of young leaders here, one of the things that you can do to facilitate growth in this area is in your sphere of influence to always be very mindful about removing barriers to encourage greater participation of the people you work with. And so start identifying what are the things that shut people out from the system or the processes that you're working on, and to encourage them to come in. So cut out bureaucracy if possible, and also be more inclusive so that you can start tapping or harness their talent. And with that, you have a lot of room to grow. The other thing is, because we are so diverse in this area, we will come across crises every day on managing these very different communities that you work with. So we will always have arguments on racial differences, religious differences in this region. But this kind of crisis actually presents us an opportunity to sell success story or to show to the rest of the world how to do this right. And I mentioned about the Christchurch shooting, and that's something New Zealand did very well in managing the crisis and helping the nation heal. And that's something I feel Asia Pacific can do better. We need to start highlighting success stories like this for the rest of the world to follow. Very quickly on about how legislators like us cope with the challenges, especially if you're a woman and you're a mother. And for me, it is really about identifying your strength. Don't try to be someone else, because today there are so many people who are very talented. And we try to copy, we lose our identity, we lose ourselves. And it's important to remain true to your conviction. So I always tell young people this: if you want to be good in anything, first of all, establish a set of convictions, something that you believe in, that will not change, even if it's not popular. Your value system must remain. And when you have that conviction, and when people see that you can hold true to it, people will start turning to you for advice. People will start seeing you as an influencer. So that's very important for young people. Now, number 2 is choose your battles. There are so many things to fight, so many causes to champion every day. And if you are not selective, if you're not fierce in guarding your time and what you want to pour your energy into, you end up doing everything just to please everybody, and you become a master of none. And so it's important to choose your battles, even in politics. So I identify in politics, these are the 2 things I want to fight. I want to fight racial politics, I want to fight corruption. And so then you just focus all your energy into these 2 things. And finally, I really, we talk a lot about women empowerment today, but really for us, it's teamwork. It's not about putting men aside, but finding ways we can work together. For a lot of the young women politicians today who are mothers, behind us or alongside us is a very supportive husband, and it's a very releasing husband who can celebrate the roles that you play. I had a conversation with Arthur in the room earlier. How do we cope becoming a parent, and what is left with your time after work, with your children, and then the balance you give it to your spouse? And that's very challenging every day. On a daily basis, we have to learn to manage this. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Hannah. And I love that this conversation is now starting to straddle the very macro, but also the very micro, because it's the personal strength that we bring as leaders, right, that often allows us to do things on that macro stage. So the questions can also, I think, veer into these more personal issues of how we cope, what we think our values are as leaders, and how we bring the best of ourselves to the issues that we are dealing with. Why don't we move to the second round of questions? I think we've covered these quite well. Right, got one here, your hand's gone up really quickly, and lady in white at the back, to the far left there, and the gentleman in the black shirt towards the back of the room. Let's start with you. Yeah. Hang on, give it 10 seconds and the voice will come on. It's like magic. Okay, go. Oh, no, not. Okay, the magic did not work this time. It'll come. Try again.
Hello.
Perfect.
Hi. Name's Ma Junjie. I'm an economist, social entrepreneur, and also a think tank professional. I'm CEO of ENC Center for Global Affairs in China. One of the challenges we face in our daily work is how to reach the young people. I mean, we used to talk about millennials don't care about anything. They are hard to reason with, and they're lazy and naive. But now we have the Gen X, the Gen Z, the whatever they call themselves. So how to reach out to them, how to build consensus in our daily work to shape the future? A general question for you guys. Thank you.
Hey, how to reach young people. Younger people, I suppose. And we've got one thought here. Yeah.
Hi,
Yeah.
I'm Natalie from Hong Kong, and I have a question for all of you about the intersection between climate, gender, and innovation. So very often, the effects of climate change disproportionately affect women and girls. For example, when in areas where water collection is manual. So when the effects of climate change damage water sources, very often it is women and girls who have to bear the burden of missing school to travel extra hours to find water for the family. So my question is, how do we better engage with women and girls to move forward community-driven solutions for climate adaptation and mitigation? Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Natalie. So climate, gender, and innovation. And one last question.
Yes. Hi, I'm Jerry Winata from Indonesia. Picking up what Arthur said about choosing between economic growth and environmental protections almost sound like it's the good old days. I think the choice now, what I would like to ask all the panelists, would it come a day that we have to choose between people or planet? And if that day ever comes, what would you choose? But if you said no, how would you get the middle, the win-win solutions, both for people and planet?
Okay, thank you very much. All right, two clusters of questions there. One around climate issues, gender and innovation on the one hand, and then the choices and the trade-offs that are involved, and then how we reach young or younger people, was Junjie's question. Shall we just have each of you respond to whichever aspects of those questions you were most moved by? Hannah, you okay to go first this time?
Okay,
Thank
I'm
you.
still thinking, but I'll answer the one about reaching girls and women and how that usually affect. How can we better help this community? I think in social causes and also reaching to this marginalized community, or when we talk about empowerment, there is a need for us to consolidate resources and ideas. The biggest problem with this pool or this area of work is that it's very fragmented and everybody wants to do and champion their own cause. So everybody starts an NGO and everybody then does their own fundraising. And as a result, very little impact is created. I work a lot with NGOs and I feel that it's very important for this group of people who are working on these causes to constantly be on the lookout for people who are already doing this in this field of work. Don't duplicate, don't recreate the wheels, or don't reinvent the wheels. Just go and support their work and find an aspect that you can help. So if it's fundraising, instead of setting my own NGO and then going through administrative processes and doing my own fundraising, why don't I just help with fundraising of this NGO? So when it comes to helping those who are deserving of help, we cannot be prideful or we cannot be pursuing our own ego. So that's why we have to start asking the difficult question. There's social causes that we champion. Is it for ourselves? Is it for us to feel good? Or is it truly to empower and to help those people? Many times I feel this is our greatest challenge in identifying a good cause and then making sure there's sustainability in helping those who need help. The second thing about mentoring young people, how can we reach young people? I think nothing beats spending time with them, because they have access to information. And nowadays, for me, managing my Facebook and then learning to cope with Instagram and then now Insta stories, and constantly having to move and to do things faster. Already I'm facing so much of problem trying to sell my message in 1 minute, because they say, beyond 1 minute, nobody's interested. And so you have to talk like a bullet train, really, really fast, and making sure that you are always engaging people. But after a while, I find that it's no longer about content, it's really about capturing their attention. And so you don't really need lawmakers to do that. Entertainers can do that as well, and that's why now you see a lot of entertainers becoming very successful in politics everywhere else. And so that, to me, is our greatest challenge in making sure that we are not just capturing their attention for the sake of having their attention, but really giving them something that is of substance, something that can help them in 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road. It can help them become a better person. And so nothing beats mentoring. That's something I want to advise all of you, because you are leaders in your own right. You really have to identify younger people who you can spend one-on-one time with and give them that input, and making sure that you're not just growing 1,000 leaders, but 2 or 3 who will come after you to do the same work that you do. Yeah.
Hannah, that's great. Thank you. I would actually add to that and say you can also reverse mentor. Get mentored by younger people. I think some of the best things I have learned in the last 10 years have been from people a lot younger than me. And I started a reverse mentoring program back home that ended up being much more popular than I thought it would be. So we've got lots of old people older people, wanting to learn, and then not enough young people to go around. So I'm hoping some of you can add to that after today. But Oyen, any thoughts?
Well, I'll start with a Hong Kong colleague who asked about the climate, gender, and innovation. You're absolutely right. Women are more disproportionately affected, and that's why we have to deliberately, consciously, and proactively support women in that issue. And for example, the programs that we support, we deliberately give less interest rates or grants, capacity building for women farmers, but also for SMEs that are led by women, and the beneficiaries have to be at least a certain percentage of the beneficiaries have to be women. So we do proactively, deliberately put women and gender angle and dimensions when we award our programs and we fund projects. So for how to reach the young people, I think Obama Foundation is a great example, reaching out and then organizing all these leadership forums. And I also mentioned that the Zurich Foundation that I lead back at home. Initially, 20 years ago, when the foundation was set up, we started with, we were trying to change the government, anti-corruption, good governance, which is very important, but after a few years, we decided it's much better investment if we just invest into youth scholarship programs, youth fellowships, so you have young leadership, rural fellowship, women leadership programs, environmental fellowship programs. So you could see how much change one can make in investing into youth. So I think this type of programs are really very fantastic, and they'll bear the fruit. And I was very happy to see from the program that it's not just the lectures, but I understand there are some community projects and programs that you will be involved in. That's what we also do back at home with our foundation. And that's how things change. That's why you have to solve the real problems there when you go to the communities and to orphanages, to hospitals and the schools as well. People versus planet. Of course, we have to choose the planet. It doesn't mean, that we just, I think there are a lot of ways that we can, well, the main question is, does this Earth can sustain 7-9 billion people population or not, of course. But I think the solutions are there, and I will give you just 2 examples. Food loss and waste. You all know that almost 1/3 of all the food is wasted, from the farm to the fork, globally. If you put all this just food loss and waste as a country, it would be the 3rd largest emitter in the world after China and the US. It's 8% of all the global greenhouse emissions. I mean, that's how much we are wasting. If we just reduce food loss and waste by 50%, which is one of the SDG goals, 12.3 as well, then we will be saving so much, not only emissions, but also, for example, water, because 70% of all the fresh water we use globally is used to produce food. And everybody is talking about, water security and water shortage and everything, but 1/4 of all the water which we use for agriculture is wasted with the food loss and waste. So there are low-hanging fruits which we can, introduce, and we don't have, of course, innovation technology is very, very important, and I think if we are very smart, if we find those leverage points, places to intervene, where small shifts can bring major changes in the system, I think we still can do well. And then I personally think that we also have to go back to our traditions. I come from Mongolia, where 1/4 of the population are still nomadic herders. For generations, for thousands of years, they lived in, and then I know many of, also in your countries as well, lived in harmony with nature. We didn't use much, we didn't waste much, nomadic herders, and there was almost no waste. And you would move from one pasture to another and let pastures rest. It was you who went and spent that month and a half, 1 month and a half ago in Mongolia in a yurt, right?
That's right.
I
very
just learned
cold.
from Aaron.
Yes, yes.
Very cold, right? Just 15 minutes ago. But if we go back to those traditions, which now nomadic herding used to be thought, well, it's maybe a bit obsolete now, it's not very useful, just a few decades ago. But now the researchers are coming back and saying, actually, this is a very sustainable way of using ecosystem and pastures if you let them rest. Unfortunately, what is happening is the climate change is affecting those pastures. There is more pasture degradation, desertification, glaciers are melting, and climate is changing. And even if the herders are trying to do the same, trying to live the same way as hundreds of years ago, it's different. The weather and climate and the ecosystems have changed. So going back to the traditions, trying to find the low-hanging fruit, and then every single citizens of the world trying, and I think that there will be more optimism. Thank you.
Thanks, Orin. Arthur?
I'll begin by addressing the I just came back from an event of a shop I opened in Shanghai. It was like so packed I couldn't breathe, and it's full of young people who I have no idea why do they know what we're doing. It's about gamification, just so you know. Like gamification, game, okay? You gotta know, like we spend, especially the younger generation, I'm no master or anything in understanding what the new generation wants. All I know is frustrated, pissy, and frustrated. And mainly it's frustrated. And a lot of that energy is used to game. Okay, lots of that time is used to game. Just go into MRTs, the transportations, and just look at what people are doing. Most of them are not reading news, or they're just looking at playing games. Or like I really think it's a frivolous to try to capture the attention of young people, because the world is very much divided. There is a group of people who really cares. Maybe it's the gentlemen and ladies that's sitting in this room. We are talking about who actually care about these deep issues. Okay, but there is a generation that's willing to turn themselves off. Okay, of course, the actual consumption is actually consumed mainly by unconscious people. Okay, I just have to this is very honest. No political bias here, but when you are very unconscious, what is the part that engages people? There's no point in trying to attract unconscious people, because your deep content, your deep concern for politics or deep concern, no one cares actually. So it's about working with bias. Okay, so to work with bias, you need to gamify it. That's just what I'm saying. That's what we learn from gaming companies. And what's interesting is the combine of short attention spans and the long-term effect. You could look at most of the games these days. If you just accumulate this short 5-minute game playing to a longer period of time, wow, you gotta think they're on that platform for a long time. Actually, if you calculate the available hour or available minutes, but it's not about capturing a minute for that short period of time. Okay, so I mean, I'm just observing from that perspective. Maybe it's not about communication. It's about changing the format of the information being received or being delivered. Okay, and so that's why I just like instant story, all this stuff. I forget it. It's not like anyone's going to watch them anyways. If you're a politician, no one's going to watch them. So, but then it's about how do you turn your message into a game, okay? That actually they feel value and be part of in their, and there's one thing, it's like fun. Like at the end, people have this selfish desire. Again, like this, it goes back to the question of choosing nature or human developments. in reality, we're all a bunch of selfish beings. It's really it's only probably few percentage of conscious people will actually want to collaborate with each other. And then you're talking about a foundation. I start off 24 years old, 25 years old as a young professor. Trust me, schools, NGOs, governments are the most competitive and politically driven, even entrepreneur are actually even more collaborative than NGOs. Okay, so.
Yes, I'm hearing some resonance in the audience here. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, okay, this is just the truth. We're just speaking from the own experience. So, there's a human desire, very selfish, okay, trying to generate all this. So, I'm all for, if for those people who are conscious in this room, which I think we are, that's why we're here, okay, we're talking about this issue. So, conscious people have to actively harness the evil power of manipulations, okay, and to manipulate into something that is worth it for them to be part of the game. And to be part of a game, then indirectly, then you don't have to choose between environment and people. By the way, environment doesn't need people. Okay, so I don't know what we're talking about here. There's no need for environment doesn't care about it. If you look at the geological space of time, we can kill ourselves, nobody cares, okay?
Right, and on that highly uplifting note, we've got about 4.5 minutes left, and so we may not have time for a full set of questions. Save them, we're only on day 1, right? So there's tons of time left. I can tell you that tomorrow's panel on entrepreneurship is going to be utterly amazing, moderated by my very dear friend, Pat Dwyer. So save some of the questions there as well. You can ask that panel about whether entrepreneurs are indeed the most collaborative people compared to NGOs and universities and members of the media. Relatively, right. But so the question I want to pose to the panel now, just as we end off, right, is this. You've heard a great deal about optimism here, right? And we started off by talking about what young people in particular can do to help us be the better angels of our nature, to use the phrase from Abraham Lincoln. Incidentally, also from Chicago, right? Or from Illinois, at least. And then now we've been hearing a bit about the more sinister side of leadership, right? The fact that there is a certain amount of manipulation that can be necessary. There are behavioral nudges that are necessary out there to push the behavior, because some human beings are just nasty, brutish, and short, right? To think about what Thomas Hobbes said hundreds of years ago. So my question to the panel, right, is this. What are the 1 or 2 leadership practices that you've had in the past, right? Either that you've learned from your mentors, reverse mentors or not, or that you've acquired over time that help you to be your best self and not give in, to that more sinister side that Arthur talked about? And what do you do to bring out the best of other people and make sure that they don't give in to the more sinister side of things? It's a big question, but I'm really asking you for life hacks or leadership hacks here, right? The specific things that our audience can take away and bring back into their organizations and their teams after this.
I'll start first. Never use the race card or the religious card, because sometimes when things go bad or things don't do well, you want to blame somebody, and we are very quick to justify it by using the racial card or the religious card, because that it's a no-brainer. It's easy to stir up emotions. It's easy to arouse the crowd and to get what you want, to get their attention. If you are a responsible, good leader, you will never use that 2 cards. And the other thing I want to say is always learn to build bridges in managing differences. Because when you build a bridge, you help facilitate the process, and you can actually have a desired outcome. But if you build up walls, you will limit healing, you will limit growth, and people will be stagnant. And so never use these 2 cards. It's so easy to fall back on these 2 cards, but never go there. Yeah.
Great. No race, no religion, build bridges. That's fantastic. Oyun?
There was a question previously about women politicians, so I'll answer with that as well. I used to work in the I served in the parliament as a member of parliament, and I'm very happy to see Bulgan who also worked in the parliament with me there, is one of the Obama fellows. Congratulations, Bulgan. What we learned as women politicians is that, and then I think all the women know, and then men probably know as well by now, but then 20 years ago, when I joined politics, I didn't know. We mustn't underestimate ourselves. And of course, when you join, you think, oh, I'm as strong as men, and I don't care that I'm a woman. But little I knew that subconscious, well, almost sort of, there are so many stereotypes. And even if you don't probably realize, men will underestimate you, women will and even yourself, you will underestimate you subconsciously. Yep. So I think it's very important to not underestimate, but also be very brave and support each other. Women supporting each other, men supporting us as well. And you think you are supporting women as well, but in reality, unless you give a conscious support, hundreds of years of stereotypes still entrenched and embedded there. And when Bulgan was working in the parliament, you will remember there were only 3 women out of 76, and 73 men and only 3 women. And now I think in the parliament there are 16, 17, still only less than 20%. So I think for women especially, the tip is be brave, work twice as much, but not in time-wise, but more effective in order to be probably received or appreciated at the same level. So unfortunately, this is still the case, and we have to be very, very brave. And then I think it's very important to talk to many people and find the places to intervene, as I said, the leverage points, right? The places to intervene, finding those, I think, very, very important in today's world, because the challenges are really daunting. There are thousands of solutions, and only few are the best solutions. So I think the lucky those who find those places.
Great. So leverage points in particular, in terms of building bridges as well. So really lots of common themes here. Arthur, in about a minute, can you wrap us up?
I don't have to wrap anything up, because I just had to confess here that recently there's people in our office who worked with me for 10 years that just left. So I'm not in the best position to offer any leadership advice, okay?
Tell us what not to do then.
I mean, as any person who's leading any companies, it's just a lot of self-reflections. I think one of the things is the fact that I can say this just shows what type of person you are. Definitely not very egotistical, but I think there's a lot more people, a lot need of that care of that ego, especially when company is doing well. When the company is doing bad, that is when people stick together. When company is doing well, that's when ego blows up out of proportion, right? So there's no leadership advice here, but.
All right. Well, thank you very much, all 3 of you, for starting us off on so much, right? Both in terms of macro themes as well as the more personal things that we can all learn from. I hope this gives you all plenty of food for thought as you start this journey over the next few days and for the rest of the year, and that it will give you plenty of things to reflect on in your workshops as well as the upcoming sessions. So thanks everybody for being a wonderful audience as well.